Welcome, everyone. We are here with Emily and Aaron from Blackpoint. We are doing this as part of our virtual Inspire. They are going to talk with us today about what the Blackpoint team brings to the table and how they've been partnering with Integris and what their solutions are. Let's kick it off with Emily. If you'd like to take a moment and kind of introduce yourself, share a little bit about how you've gotten to work with Blackpoint and what you're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Adele. I'm Emily Bookman. I am Integris's dedicated partner account manager here at Blackpoint. I'm with my colleague, Aaron Matassa, as well. He is the dedicated security sales engineer, and together we make up the partner team for Integris. And what we're here to do is help our partners like Integris understand the entire product ecosystem, help them sell to their clients, talk to them about security overall, and just showcase where Blackpoint solutions might fit for some of their clients' needs.
And we are really excited to have you guys. We have had a lot of great conversations. They've done a great job with Inspire and sharing a lot of great information about what we can expect in the security space today.
Before we go into kind of what Blackpoint does and our ecosystem of products, just want to take a step back and talk a little bit about where Blackpoint came from. So our CEO and founder, his name is John Murchison, spent over 12 years in the NSA conducting high-level security operations on the offensive side. 95% of the NSA is very reactionary and on the defense. So John was part of this very small subset, again, doing these real-time, hands on keyboard, eyes on glass missions on the offensive front. And what he wanted to do after his decade plus in the NSA is create a solution to bring to the MSP market that would essentially stop hackers in their track. Hackers are ever changing. The threat landscape is ever changing. We're going to dive into what the threat landscape looks like today a bit, where it's going. We're going to dive into a little bit on that ecosystem of products that we have, which is managed detection and response at our core. And then we're going to go into some of our SOC saves. So we have a 24/7 SOC backing, basically providing full-time 24/7 protection, both on-prem and in the cloud. We are a security software company, so we've developed all of our tools in-house from the ground up, and we're going to dive into that a bit as well. So Aaron, do you want to go ahead and kick off a little bit of the state of the threat landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. We released our annual report earlier this year, flies. A couple of things that came out from this is right here in the center is the cloud still being king. So part of Blackpoint's protection to the Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace environment through a product called Cloud Response. What we're seeing is about 78% of the responses we've done last year. And this number, if anything, is going up for this year, are originating of those cloud environments, which a lot of that is Microsoft 365. So a lot of customers who come to us are really concerned about their identity protection. But before that, we also have to note that ransomware it's not dead, right? There's still a lot of attacks. There's still a lot of criminals making a lot of money there. But the big thing is that it's evolving because it's no longer just encrypting your files, having a ransom key, and like the overwhelming majority of us are not paying ransom anymore. Is it because we don't support that anymore? We have better backups now, or where we for different encryption keys and such. But instead, a lot of ransomware actors are turning to double extortion, which is essentially resulting in them exfiltrating files from the environment and then promising to leak those files should they not get a ransom payment there. So you have encrypted files and then you have data theft, which can become a whole different issue that they're using to gain more attacks, gain more success in getting those payments. But the big thing we see and what we're looking at towards the future as opposed to what and in 2023 is that just general attacks in the identity space are increasing and will continue to increase. We're seeing over 10,000 brute force attempts on average per day. And what this really means is we entered a world where security or the easiest, we want to make the least path of resistance the best path for our end users, right? And how we've done this is through tools like single sign-on, which has been fantastic because you have one time you enter your username, one time you enter your password, one time you authenticate multi-factor your authentication token. And the less times you enter in that sensitive information, the less chance that you have for that to be stolen, right? But those things, middle attacks, session hijacking, whatever it might be. But the problem that occurs is when you centralize everything in a single sign-on or SSO platform, once that identity is compromised, now your attacker, whoever you are just getting access to a plethora of tools. And these plethora of tools can get you access to your CRM, to your Op5, to your endpoint workstation, right? Because all these identities are really from on-premises to the cloud. So this has shown that attackers are smart. They're not kids on basement, these are criminal organizations, right? And so they're having a huge focus towards these single attacks that unlock large parts of an organization, especially if they can push out. Um,
That's scary. So what does Blackpoint do to help with that?
yeah. So we have a whole ecosystem of products, which we should probably go ahead and
Perfect. Yeah. So to touch on this ecosystem, I want to just note that we have a threat intelligence team. They're called our APG team. So that's that first column that we're seeing on the left-hand side. Our APG team, they are researching current and emerging threats. They're keeping up on ransomware groups, what their tactics and procedures are, various industries that they're targeting, and they're feeding that knowledge to our SOC. Hackers are changing on the daily. They're becoming much more crafty. They don't want to be stopped by traditional antivirus EDR solutions. So they're trying to get around those tools that might stop them that are more automated. They can also reverse engineer a lot of attacks. They do reverse engineer attacks. So it's really interesting because our SOC also gets that context of when there is an attack. They're able to take a step back, reverse engineer things, and actually follow the hacker's behaviors at a very high level holistic view. Some of the patents that we have are in network visualization. We're able to see all devices that are on a network. We have a Windows agent, we have a Mac agent to protect that on-prem. We then also integrate with all major antivirus EDR solutions on the market to also get that telemetry. And really what this is doing is giving our SOC analysts that bird's eye view. They're able to see that initial point of intrusion and any behaviors and lateral spread movement thereafter. So we're looking at tradecraft, we're looking at abuse of legitimate IT tools, we're looking at all these behaviors around actually what's happening, and our SOC is then able to take a response from there. So really important when you're looking for an MDR solution, looking at what that R is. A true response is what you're going to want in today's world. Not just kicking you an alert, not just telling you or Integris, hey, go look at this alert, this looks suspicious, but actually having an offensive, proactive partnership where the SOC is responding in real time and then providing all the details around the event that happened thereafter. So what our SOC is doing is they are responding to a threat in real time. They're then going to pick up the phone and let Adel's team know, hey, in this client's network, we went ahead and we isolated this device because there was suspicious behavior around it. We're providing all the details of the event, timestamp analysts that picked up the ticket. We're doing early remediation and then providing additional remediation recommendations to get you stitched back up and back online. And because it's the 24/7 operations with real humans and people in the SOC, Integris with the partnership can call up our SOC, get additional details. So you'll have the whole view. If you do log in the morning and your device can't get in, you'll have all the details of why and then next steps so that you are able to continue your workday. We then were the first provider to bring MDR to the cloud. So first with Microsoft 365 and then Google Workspace as well. So we're able to take a real response and true response in that cloud and hybrid environment. And then of course, compliance with logic. We totally understand needing to collect and store logs, check off that compliance box, but we separate security and compliance. We do all of our threat hunting via that Snap Defense platform so that it is real-time threat detection and response. And then we can go ahead and collect and store those logs using the agent that's already on the endpoint to satisfy and check off that box. And Aaron, if you want also, please jump in and give some more color and flair to all of this.
Absolutely. How did you think that Delta thing? There's one of the things you mentioned, Emily, is how we take that active response for a company. And I think when we're talking the MSP space, it's a big differentiator, but a lot of people say, hey, I need an MSP for that. And why does it matter to them? MSP A, MSP, one SOC said to take a response, one MSP says they take a response. And the big thing that we usually come across is does matter. Not that it's not that y'all don't have very skilled engineers across your environment, but it's, well, yeah, if you have an emergency at home and you're calling 911 and you need an implant at your house, what skill set do you want there? Do you want someone specifically trained to be that emergency responder? Or do you want someone who works on the day in, day out? Or do you want the volunteer, not the volunteer, it's a terrible way to say it, or someone who doesn't work on those big incidents all the time, but is on call after
How about a pediatrician?
pediatrician. There you go. Much better analogy. So, because yeah, our SOC analysts are seeing the at scale across.
Yes.
They're
Um,
they're processing a lot of information and looking at
mhm.
that information day in and day out with a lot more context than what a help desk engineer on our side would have if they were.
It would be a brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
the ransomware response piece is really key here as well. As Emily mentions, this is something that actually doesn't get enacted too terribly off one point because of where our focus is on initial access, privilege discovery, privilege escalation, and that lateral spread privileges. The ones I compromise the account where I go and really focus in those early stages. There are times where threat actor is able to rapidly escalate across those. One that happened not too terribly long ago was when there was an administrator account, no MFA enforced. We had 3389 open on open RDP open to the world, and they were able just to immediately launch right in and launch a ransomware attack on the within a very short period of time. Yeah. So Blackpoint's ransomware response actually kicked into gear. We had decoy file that we sampled every ransomware piece that we could get our hands on, and we developed these decoy files to accomplish two. One, they're designed to hit early on in the process, and two, they're designed to be very difficult to exclude via some randomization principles. What these do is once a decoy file gets touched, that process and this parent process is going to be suspended in memory. It's going to pause that ransomware from occurring. Then that event is going to engage our 24/7 SOC, our security operations center, who is then going to get a threat hunt across the organization. They're going to take isolation actions, most likely, on those endpoints that are initially affected, those patient zeros. And then you're in a situation where you could have had a mass ransomware attack, and you have minimal encryption on initial patient zeros. The ransomware is suspended, threat actor is kicked out of your environment, and the device is in isolation, ready to digital threat with that. That's a theory. And the example that happened fairly recently, and I'm referring to, actually only had one device in.
Wow. That's awesome. It's really taking early action with your ecosystem, being able to identify as quickly as possible and shut down what's happening before it can spread.
That's the goal. Yeah, before they deploy payloads, before they're deploying malware, when they're figuring out, because a lot of folks look at it and they think of, I had a criminal outside of my environment and now I have ransomware, or now I have wire fraud, right?
Right.
But really, there's a lot of steps in between. And just because you have a criminal inside your network doesn't mean you've gotten to the right of boom, I'm calling my cyber insurance, right? They have to figure out a lot of steps and what is their opportunity and going to be.
Yeah. This can definitely help. This helps Integris sleep at night because we know that our clients are having a lot of eyes on their environment 24/7 and are being able to shut things down as quickly as possible. I heard a couple of stories with our team and how impressed they've been with how quickly the response happens, how quickly we're notified of the response, and then we're able to work with your team and get folks up and running again, trace what happened, figure out where the root cause was, and just keep moving. So it's not something that hasn't limited how our clients work day in and day out.
To that point too, I think in this remote world that we all live in and just the amount of travel we all do, maybe answering email phones wherever we are, having that endpoint security in tandem with that cloud security is so key. As Erin said before, our SOC is taking anywhere from 8 to 10 times more responses in the cloud than they are on-prem on a weekly basis right now. And it's showing that there is such an attack vector with the cloud, but being able to also watch a hacker or a threat actor laterally move from the endpoint to the cloud and vice versa is really important too. So having that 24/7 protection. So like you said, you could sleep at night. Hackers for some reason don't like to operate during business hours is super important. So we're really here so that you guys, your clients can run their business, you guys can support your clients, and then we're here in the case that a threat actor does get in and start laterally moving and gets into the environment. So that's really where Blackpoint fits in here, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Can you talk a little bit more about the compliance piece? I know it's not the exciting part because it's not actually responding in the moment, and that's the part that really makes a difference for our clients and how they do business day in and day out. But compliance is still super important for folks to do business and be able to keep up with what the regulations are asking of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Erin, do you want to maybe dive into what a traditional theme model looks like and where Blackpoint MDR plus logic is a bit different?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the traditional SIEM model that a lot of us are used to, and it seems that information and event monitoring, you're going to collect logs from a lot of different sources. Those could be your endpoint, and those could be your cloud environment. They may also be your firewalls. They may be line of business application. They may require physical appliances at various locations and such. But the holistic theme is that you're going to ingest all the logs from those sources and ship them somewhere. That could be on site. It could be in the cloud. It could be with a vendor.
Yep.
Not for the conversation, but they're going to be shipped somewhere else. That requires a handful of different things. One, it requires you to have all that configuration time. So that's a lot of the value, a lot of the onboarding costs, right? That increases. But the other thing is that it requires you to move the logs from where the activity is happening and then store them, right? And not just the logs that are relevant, but all the logs in general are being exported, right? And then what you've got is you have the prerequisite to threat hunting being that log retention, of course, right? And so, but post what you have is you have to analyze all those logs and then pouring through all that data, even with processing, it is a lot and intensive, adding to the cost. But when you have all these third-party logs you're utilizing, you have a vendor-specific log requirement, is what I call it. So does that that traditional SIEM-based model have specific threat intelligence for all types of different, let's say, network devices? Maybe you have Meraki, maybe you have Cisco's, maybe you have SoundWalls, Fortinet, Palo Alto, right? Do you support all of these? Do you support all of these across all of these environments that we have? And if you don't, then unfortunately, the best case scenario is that they're just looking at the event that the systems are already generating, or they're not looking at those logs at all until after for digital forensics purposes, this is not valuable, right? But then even once you get an event, you have to piece all these and a lot of correlation from all these different data pieces that you then have to get to an analyst, and then that analyst has to figure out where are they responding. Are they responding in the firewall? Are they responding in the domain controller on the endpoint? Are they responding in the cloud? And do they have access to all of it to make that timely response? Or are they sending the alert over to the MSP, other models to be enabled, and then it's for them to reverse engineer and figure that out as well. So where Blackpoint comes in is we definitely, just as you mentioned, maintaining those log history is really important for not only for compliances, for cyber insurers, for digital forensics purposes, right? You never know when you're going to need them, but we don't have that as our primary accounting method because of, we don't utilize those specifically for the primary accounting method because of some of the drawbacks that it has, namely around the large data requirement and the processing requirements and the vendor threat intelligence requirement. So by Blackpoint being directly on the endpoint with Windows OS and integrating Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace log, running our own proprietary connection. So we don't care what license levels from our perspective you have in 365 and such. We're fairly agnostic. We're able to, no matter where a user is, where an endpoint, where the attack is occurring, home, where in the office, at home, dialing connection from Mars, whether the attacker got in due to a 0-day, a known vulnerability, or Adel, you just gave them your username and password. They asked very nicely. So we said, here you go. It's all the same, right? We're able to we can watch that attack unfold with our wide network map visualization with no log ingestion on network. And so it doesn't matter if you have a flat network that is simple as can be, or if you have a very mature zero trust architecture that is more complex, right? We're building our wide network visualizations from the input where we can see both agent-based attacks and attacks from non-agent-based systems that you can't log, you can't have any endpoint technology onto, and be able to watch those people take a response right there for your platform. And then we have all the logs
For the
stored for it.
Yep. Yeah. So it's really taking in a lot more information than what those traditional logs do and processing it in real time.
It's taking a lot more tailored, concise information.
Yeah.
And it's one of the analogies that I like. It's like looking at the difference between a SWAT team and a detective, right? The SWAT team, they may work the same incident, right? But your SWAT team needs very concise but yet high fidelity information to make very short term, high consequential action. Your detective is going to use a lot of the same data, but they need all the data. They need the entire, every picture and 3 pictures ago as well, right? And they're going to pull out individual data they care about, right? And they have not always the luxury of infinite time, but a lot more time than a member to go through it, right? So you wouldn't equip both of those roles with the same tools to do different jobs.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense.
And to what Aaron said too, separating the actual threat hunting and then being able to, again, check off that compliance box that you're collecting and storing those logs. The separation allows Blackpoint to have really fast response times. And fast response times and moving quickly is really key to isolate and make sure that we stop the bleeding as quickly as possible. And we make sure when we isolate a device, we're cutting the connectivity from the rest of the network, but our SOC is still able to take a look and communicate with this device to meticulously, we keep saying the whole analogy of a doctor, meticulously get the bad actor out and then stitch them back up, get them back onto the network. So being able to cut off that connectivity in an instant is super helpful. And that's something our SOC is able to do right from the action engine.
Yes, that is definitely important. Well, you guys have got a couple of stories about some of these incidents and how Point has helped. Why don't we talk about the M365 one?
This is a really popular one to go through, and something we see all the time, not just because the majority of responses are in the cloud, because a lot of folks misunderstand, they don't always understand that it had multi-factor authentication, yet the criminal still got in. And it is a couple of common needs,
I
right?
tell people all the time that once you have MFA, you're good, right?
It used to be. And it used to be when I got a call, when I was on call and I woke up in the middle of the night to the firewall crashed. But yeah, the landscape changes for sure.
Yeah.
But please always have multi-factor authentication. Definitely going to help. So don't take it away. But it's definitely the vulnerability. And you have the 2 common pieces that we usually see are what's called MFA spamming and command failure, where the MFA spamming can be just as a sound. Especially we don't have that sign-on technology in place. And we have so many MFA prompts entering the code, or we just have the yes, no, approve, deny button, and then credentials compromised, and an attacker just keeps doing it over and over until you accidentally hit yes and the no, and then all right, add their own multi-factor authentication device and never have to bother you anymore. It will no longer be a nuisance for you. But the other way that we see very often is a man-in-the-middle attack, which what's occurring here is that you'll get likely a spoofed URL, whether that's Teams chat or email, whether it's click online, maybe to a search engine poisoning ad, and then it's going to prompt you to a login browser. Login browser is going to look very similar to something that you're used to, like Microsoft 365 is a very common one, but it could be any location you log into. You'll type in your username and password because for some reason you aren't logged in. You thought you were, right? And then it prompts you through multi-factor authentication. But all the while, what's occurring is that as you enter the username and password, it goes to the attacker, and the attacker is then passing it through. It's that man in the middle, right? But then when you enter your multi-factor, what's actually happening is there's a session token that goes from the browser to there, and that's the token that Black will revoke, right? But so they're going to steal that token, and then you'll get passed through. Maybe they're taking you to a legitimate site and passing along through. Maybe they're taking you still to a false site. You're starting to think something funny is going on.
Yeah.
But more importantly, they have this token they steal, and then they can then take that token, and that is basically the key, say, they just took the key that said IME, right? And then you take this key to their own browser on their own computer and inject it into their browser and then log in, right? And so they've now logged on with no further prompt for yourself. They have you do local access on their computer to your account. This is where we find this all the time by detecting things like these logins from various locations. A lot of times they're using logins from various proxies, but we're also seeing them actively sign on, doing things like adding those additional authenticators, doing things like making inbox rules to throw everything to the RSS feeds of deleted items or send things externally, as well as on SharePoint Online.
Wow. How often do people always know that they've done that? Like that, like you said, sometimes we suspect it's a funky site. Like, how often do people actually realize that they've even gone through that process and fallen prey to that attack?
Yeah, I think the question is how often they realize in time,
Um,
fortunately.
yeah.
Dwell time is the big thing.
Huh.
I think these are professional organizations and we shouldn't take too much on. I've fallen for a stimulated phishing work before. Maybe I've fallen for a real one. I hope not. But they are good. You should feel bad about falling for these because they are going to get you if you don't let your guard down. But I'd say I'd say a lot of these people don't know. Like you have those, it's really far few between seems when someone raises their hand and says, let's look at my security team. Can you check
Yeah.
it out? Right. And usually it just find out within the wire.
Yeah.
Yeah. To Aaron's point to what it looks like, say you get an email in your inbox, Adele. Someone's asking you to take a look at some sort of spreadsheet that they put together. They need your approval. You click on it, brings you to what looks like a legitimate application. And they really do look exactly like the applications. And that's part of the scary part, I guess you can say. They look like legitimate sites. And you could fool anyone once. And when you look at some of these legitimate sites, they look exactly what the legitimate app is. But to Aaron's point, it's not a legitimate app. It's supposed to look like one. That's why users get caught here. However, what's happening after what our SOC sees is they'll say you open up that email through your Microsoft and it logs in from Jersey. And then all of a sudden we're seeing a login from a risky country like Russia 5 minutes later. That's obviously not realistic. Would be crazy to be able to log in from Jersey and then Russia within a 5 minute span. So our SOC is getting an alert trigger directly through the action engine that basically shows a login from an unapproved country or login from new device and IP. And that's what triggers the additional threat hunt, just to paint that full picture of what the SOC is doing.
Yeah. And that's why you need to have that on the other side too, because their MFA is not enough anymore.
This next one we have here, the Citrix Suite, is a really interesting one for me. For folks not aware, Citrix is a virtualization company where you can stream applications or remote desktops, and their infrastructure is publicly accessible by nature. It's just how it works. Late last year, they had an exploit that allowed their platform to compromise the downstream authentication by a tenant user account, an administrator account, had access to the Citrix system. Lots of people miss this. So this is what we call a 0 day, right? Which because in it's the 0 day is it was an unknown vulnerability until it became known and exploited, right? There were a lot of folks up on the bandwagon. We had a lot of a lot of organizations got hit by this. But what big problem was that there is no logs to indicate compromise on this.
Wow.
There was nothing you could do to look in Citrix or the Citrix logs to determine it was I hit by this. So when you had this, your instructions were to smash and assume compromise because updating the application from to system administrator side was remediation. So Blackpoint was able to stop this a number of times, actually. Blackpoint was able to stop this, even though we also didn't have endpoint technology on what they call the NetScaler appliances. So there's no logs and we didn't have an endpoint on where the attack originated. And these NetScaler appliances, they're custom Linux distribution that you can't really always put anything onto, but it doesn't matter if it's a custom Linux distribution of a vendor's appliance or a smart camera or bridge near off the internet with the world. It still want to be able to visualize these threats.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to visualize those core techniques and tactics and not necessarily rely on Solus logs to tell you something we have, right? That's where we're really trying having those endpoint agents being able to visualize that lateral spread across the environment in those core techniques that criminals use, regardless of how they use them or what method of delivery they have.
So it's basically invisible.
If you were a traditional scene model built on threat hunting and logs, this is something that a lot of people missed.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's no logs, no site, stuff, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And this last one is something that a lot of folks are calling hearing the word info stealer a lot more. And these info stealers, they're bad. They get on your endpoint. They steal your banking credentials. I actually just looked into something recently is they're starting to steal VPN configuration file.
Oh,
You can get initial access into other systems, right? So they're expanding, right? But what happens is that these info stealers are typically known malware, right? And so you have tools like your EDRs, your 701s, or your definitive endpoints, your CrowdStrike, right? Who have these features, which is fantastic. That's exactly what that layered stack is supposed to do. That's their job. What's occurring is that these EDRs are blocking the info stealers from running. And then saying, congratulations, look what I did. I'm so cool, right? And here at Blackpoint, we ingest all of those events from those EDRs, and then we threat hunt on those with our own data, our own agent, our own human analyst. We can respond through our own agent as necessary with our own analyst. But what we're seeing happen is that there's more to the story. It stops the malicious process from running, but these info stealers, they know they're signatured and they know they're known bad. So their goal is how much can I run in fractions of a second before the EDR stops me? And they're looking to game your system. They're doing adding special tasks, doing what's called the registry, each file stuff, adding different things like DLL, things that allow them to call home and being persistent. And then the EDR stops the initial payload, versus script, but it's to look at what that ran. We collect all of that metadata information. Our humans talk on it, and we're out of these by half EDRs.
wow, that's crazy. They really are, the threat actors are just looking every day to come up with new ways and faster ways to get in and be able to take information.
Yeah, and the SOC doesn't take everything at face value. They're investigating every alert. We're correlating different alerts together so we can see the story unfold and see all the aspects involved. And then you have that dedicated 24/7 SOC analyst team who is doing this 24/7 as well on your network, taking the response where necessary.
That's awesome. That is why we partner with Blackpoint, because you guys are not just reacting, but you're also taking a lot of actions and being proactive about the information you're gathering and using that to make us better and to make your business better too. You guys for joining us today and for sharing your stories and your expertise. We really appreciate everything that Blackpoint brings to the table for us as a partner, and the expertise, the knowledge, and the tool has done so much for our clients, and we look forward to partnering with you guys more in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Del. And